Welcome back to Surprise Multiplayer. A little stage setting today. The podcast is in desperate need of audio and musical intros and cues to help separate segments. But why I can't help as Jeremy here, this part, that's our first segment. Why does Jeremy hate music? We talk about music, Run the Jewels 2, multitasking, driving, live recording, MP3 quality and mastering, monster cables, opera, learning languages, and learning generally. Next, we hit a topic rant of mine. Can we just stop talking about Kubernetes? We bring up the future of problem solving, OpenStack and transformation into Kubernetes, cron and abstractions, tech debt, hacker news train, complexity, dictators into technology departments. This transitions into AI and how it impacts programming. 4 is greater than 10, productivity AI, tired of the chat interface, where in the org does the AI get used, tech is not ready for LLMs, Apple, iPhone, LLMs don't do dick, more silos in tech, email is the greatest tech, and shots were fired about blockchain and web of trust. John takes us into what are we playing now? GT7, Baldur's Gate, Diablo 2, campaign good, seasons bad, being let down is normal, gaming is social, Destiny 2, VR, nostalgia is strong with this one, child labor, F1 2023, offline championships, David Portnoy, Matt Levine, and One Bite Pizza. We both got a little sidetracked down into family and games at this point in time, where we ended up talking about Factorio, kids and stupid games, read rather than YouTube, YouTube to fix things, Kurtzitsan, unreasonableness as a father, screen time, contacts, iOS 7, streaks, Face ID, green light, Apple becoming a bank, Apple Card, Betterment, and YNAB.
How about we start with, why does Jeremy hate music?
All right.
Cool. Because hating music, you're putting emotion behind it.
Well, let me start with a statement. It's not that I hate music. I don't seek it out. I listen to the same 6 albums for probably the last 5 to 6 years. Every now and then a new album will come into my repertoire. The last new album that came in was Run the Jewels 2. And that's about it.
Respect. I don't think I would say it's fair to say you hate music, but it takes a lot for you to gain respect enough.
No. I just don't seek it out. I me listening to music is literally, I have to be unwilling to listen to something else in the car and be alone and being either angry, being mad at something, frustrated, and trying to fucking do something else. But
is it always that same emotion, or does different emotions affect the different type of music you listen to?
Always that same emotion, and almost all the music's going to fit into that genre, except for a little bit of Logic, but that's a little bit of weird ATL because Jeremy's weird.
So, I remember we've been talking a long time, and one thing that always you would say to me is, you don't know how I do things, multitask, and do things, in the car, for example, take a meeting or even, listen to a podcast. We both do that. But driving and doing 2 or 3 things is multitasking. Does music fit into the same kind of realm for you as listening to a podcast? Because music isn't necessarily intellectually stimulating.
So it is. That's why the things I like are usually things that are continuous story arcs inside the music. Even though I re-listen to them over and over again. What's Logic's album where it's about a spaceship going to another planet? It's literally a story from the beginning album. I only listen to the album from beginning to end, all the way through, and that's it. And then move on. Run the Jewels isn't a continuous story arc, but if you listen to it enough times, it is.
You listen to anything enough times, it becomes kind of a
But I mean,
circle.
it's always me thinking about something. And so, yeah, it is inherently, I think in the last 10 years of my life, I have really, really stopped being able to multitask. And it's not because I don't think I can, because I don't choose to. I find that I give poor effort to things that I try to multitask to. I find that even podcasts, I do house cleaning while I do podcasts, or at least the ones I give a shit about.
Yeah.
With music, same way. I mean, driving, I want to listen to it. I'm angry, but I'm going to listen to what I want. Oh my God, if my wife puts on country music, I'm going to die. That's a whole different issue.
I think I'm very similar in the sense where I'll do certain activities and associate it with either listening to a podcast, listening to music. The difference with how I approach music, for me, it's very much does it sound good? And am I in the mood to hear that type of beat, right? I'll have different playlists. Like one of my playlists is named, was it Big Hair and Smoke Machines? And Raid the Arcade. So, yeah, and I think very much playlists to fit a certain mood. And an interesting thing for me lately, I'd say in the last probably 10 years, listening to music, I appreciate so much more acoustic live albums, like recordings from Red Rocks, very good, high quality recordings live.
Why? What is different? Like, as a person, I can't hear a beat to save my life. I couldn't tell you what a good recording is from a bad recording. What is the difference? What about a live good recording do you care about?
So you hear so much more in the music when it's not, mixed and I don't know, overdubbed, and everything's, I guess, depending on the music, it sounds entirely different, right? And I think when the genre that I grew up with was very much like I don't know, grunge, punk, post 90s, early 2000s, and music just to me started to all sound the same right after that. So, genres all sounded the same is a better way to put it. Except when you have an acoustic or a live performance, especially a performance at like Red Rocks, where it's some of the best acoustics I've heard in live albums.
Is that something like I know more about like the science of mixing, and not because I care, but because I came across it. I found it really interesting that for a long time that music was pushed to the highest possible amplitude to make sure that it was loudest on the radio, because that turned out to be valuable to make sure they got played and replayed, and it was working to create albums that were one-hit wonders in the 90s and the 2000s. And then it changed when basically with the advent of MP3, where literally live albums are considered to be sound less good than most people that grew up with only MP3s, because that's what they expect. They expect the quality of an MP3, the mastering of an MP3. And so like there's a college professor at a Cambridge or some school where he basically, that one, I think it was 2005, 2006, he goes, there's the year it flipped. It was a year when people preferred MP3 quality, massively mastered music over live, because that's what they were exposed to. And that's the part that I found interesting, not how it all went in.
I remember a point in time where I preferred MP3 to, was it high quality audio from CDs and even DVD performances. I don't think, or even today, I don't even remember it being anything about necessarily the sound or the quality of the music, but rather just the ease of use of an MP3 versus those other formats. For example, there's a Dropkick Murphys concert that I went to 2006 maybe during St. Paddy's Day, and about 3 or 4 months later they put out a DVD. DVD had high quality audio from the same performance that they did over 7 days, and they basically mixed and matched the best of every single track over those 7 days, and you got the best performance for that time. The quality was so much better, but in order to get at that quality, I needed to spend thousands of dollars on equipment because I'm not really going to hear that if I put it in my El Cheapo PlayStation 2 DVD player and output it on Logitech desktop speakers.
Do you need monster cables for that?
Yeah, back then I probably would have bought monster cables. Yeah.
Okay. Not to buy monster cables now.
I know not to buy monster cables.
Thank you.
Yes, that was a joke.
I was about to have a lot of fun with you for the rest of this podcast.
No, not to buy monster cables. But I think getting back to my original statement, I prefer acoustics just like my music growing up. The best artists that I continue to listen to and that I remember from my childhood were all artists that I saw live. Except for, the oldies and the classics, things my parents grew up with, but like the artists that of my years I saw live, and they continue to be the best ones. So it's really the experience for me. And listening to acoustic live performances, it gets me to that experience of being at a live show.
I do not share that experience at all. My live show experiences were George Clinton, Parliament Funkadelic, way back in the 90s, and me going, oh my God, this is loud. I don't know what's going on. Get me the hell out of here.
That might be the anger part, and
yeah, that also might be because he came on stage naked, but
that too.
Yeah, George Clinton's going to do what he's going to do.
Is he still around?
I think so.
Yeah.
He's got to be.
Today I learned.
Yep, he's still around. Ooh,
wow.
God, he's getting old. 82 years.
I was say early mid-80s.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I can't dance. I can't teach my kids how to dance. I can't hear a beat. Music is basically lost on me. So if you ask me to pick out, so this conversation started because I'm like, if we're going to have music at the beginning of the podcast, don't ask me. I'm not going to be a part of this question. It's not going to work well.
So let me ask this question. I've seen you, at least I recall, seeing you play Twitch games and games with beats. Not Guitar Hero, but can you play those? Is that something that you're able to
it's usually it's like keyboard and hand-eye coordination. I can figure out patterns with my hands. I can't hear the beat. I can't predict the beat. It just never happens. Ask my wife will be like, when the beat changes just the slightest bit, I will lose everything. I'm like, wait, it changed. Why did it change? I'm like, well, it's music. She's like, it moves on. And I'm like,
that's interesting. I understand not really having, I wouldn't say I have an appreciation for music. For me, if it sounds good, I listen to it. And it could be any genre. I don't really care about the beefs and the politics and all the meta things that go on in the music genres. Pretty much my playlists go all the way from I'd say the late 60s through, I don't know, something that came out this year. So, yeah. But I do find it interesting that you it doesn't really get you you don't zone out or anything to it. You don't get behind get a groove of either writing software, because a lot of programmers often will use that as a mechanism to block out the rest of the world if they're working.
I do use soft, boring classical music, not because it's because noise canceling headphones don't work without some kind of audio playing through.
Sure.
And it's repetitive enough that it doesn't matter, but it doesn't require my attention. I do like classical music. I find it enjoyable, but it's just music to me. It's like, great. Hey, it's nice to play in the background so that there's not dead silence.
Do you have you ever gone to the orchestra? Is that something?
I have a feeling I would appreciate it if I was willing to learn about it. And that's the thing with music, is I've never learned about it. I don't understand it. It's just dark magic. So And most of the things I like, I have to have kind of a sense of understanding, and I've never gotten there. I do want to go to the orchestra. I do find classical music interesting. Like I said, background noise, kind of like, hey, great. Maybe that would be something interesting. But I am more interested in operas because, and that's something I want to, is because the opera is about telling a story and gonna hold my attention, I think. But I gotta admit, Vivaldi's the seasons, those kind of stuff, I find my own stories in those, but still background noise.
Going a little bit on a tangent, I know growing up you moved a lot. Do
Yep.
you know are you bilingual? Do you know multiple
No.
languages? So kind of the opera in particular is often in Italian, right?
Yep.
I'm Italian 3 generations or so, but I don't know anything other than, basic curse words and some stuff you'd say in the home around your grandmother. Um, do you think you could follow a story, especially one that's sung in an opera, not knowing Italian? I've never gone myself.
No, I couldn't. But the fact that I wouldn't and I would want to, it would probably be the reason why I'd find it intriguing. It's something to learn. It's something to understand. It's the nuance. It's the, hey, Jeremy's going to have to go read a book after this.
A challenge.
That's, yes, constantly like, oh, great. And then I'll cram my brain with a bunch of information that'll eventually fall out of it. But that process will be fun.
I know you're like me, and I've seen you cram very quickly, learning new things, especially programming languages or concepts. Do you think there's a way to translate that to learning a language? I haven't spoken language. I haven't figured it out yet, if there is.
I have found as long as there's we talked about this before for me, if there's a reason I can prove somebody wrong, I can do it. And if you sit there and said like, Jeremy, you could never learn France, and I had 2 weeks, no problem. I'm moving to France. I'm going to go immerse myself. I'm going to come back and be cursing that person out into. I'm like, look, it's not, the human brain is fucking amazing. It's about willingness to do it and having a true drive to do it. That's it. I mean, sure, if I was 70, it'd be much harder than when I'm 45. And it'd be harder now than when I was 25. But it still ain't impossible. It's drive. It's willingness to sit down and go, for me, I'm going to prove that person wrong. If you ask me to go self-motivate to do that, probably not.
We could talk a whole multiple segments on self-motivation. I'm a poster child for not having it. But something you said in particular is I think an interesting topic, and at least for spend a couple minutes on. I'm of the age that body parts are starting to hurt.
Oh, yes. All the time.
But one thing that scares me is when the brain starts to go and the memory starts to go. I haven't up till now. The only other body parts that have gone has been my eyesight. But do you find it harder to learn as you get older? Because I don't. That's actually something that for me hasn't declined.
I'm going to be more exact because no, I don't find it harder to learn. I find its willingness to try to learn something new that's the hot thing is much harder for me to climb because I've seen it all before and I'm like, why are we doing this again? I'm not going to learn some new whiz bang feature. Like, it's just the same thing over and over again. I just because it's on Hacker News doesn't mean I need to learn it. When it's deployed to 1 million hosts and people actually give a shit and we're actually doing something useful with it, then it's time to learn.
It makes a lot of sense.
That's age.
It's experience, though. It's less age and more experience. I think, you don't necessarily get them both hand in hand, but but when you do get experience, you start to learn the things to know not to do are much more important than knowing the things to do.
Oh, I mean, I think this will come up throughout all of our podcasts in one form or another is Jeremy's goal in life is to find out what not to do over and over again and but this is something I try to teach people. And we talk about this in some of the mentoring is how do we get people to pick that they don't like something and just stop? Same thing goes for me. I don't like, we can talk about any random technology and I'm like, I don't like that. I don't want anything to do with it. I'm backing the fuck away. Doesn't mean I can't learn it. It's not because I'm not capable. It's just like, no, I'm not interested.
For one reason or another, through your experience, you realize that there is no value to you and probably to the people listening in learning a particular thing.
Yep.
Because you've seen everyone bash their head into a table 1,000 times over.
And I'm going to be wrong. And I'm going to get some of those wrong. And I'm going to have to go learn it eventually. That's fine. I mean, whoop-de-doo. I'm wrong all the time.
Kubernetes.
No. Yeah, I think that's kind of like our segue into what I thought was a conversation starter. I'm really excited for AI, not because I haven't seen anything, because it's not particularly great yet, but because at least can we stop talking about Kubernetes in the technology space? I'm so tired about hearing about Kubernetes and how it's going to solve things. It's nothing special. In fact, 99% of the time I see people talk about it, they don't need it.
That is absolutely true. And I realized, so Kubernetes was something special years ago. It enabled for a new type of deployment, for faster deployment, for, I would argue, teams that are not as well staffed to be able to do that same type of deployment with virtual machines. Now we're at the point where a lot of companies have sunken their teeth in, and I'm on YouTube and I'm seeing Kubernetes commercials. Probably because I searched something like Kubernetes API console in Google.
Maybe it's my personal experience, but you remember OpenStack?
That's a hard one. That feels really deep.
I mean,
I do remember OpenStack.
It was a transformative for companies, allowed them to do things, and then the corporations got the talents into it. They started making every whiz-bang feature. Everybody developed their. It sounds really familiar, except for they never gave it to developers. Now we've expanded the pie, and now every developer thinks they need it on top of it. And it's like, why are we solving cron jobs with 16 levels of abstraction in Kubernetes?
Not only 16 levels of abstraction, but something that before we would run in a cron tab on a host, now you need like $150 worth of infrastructure to run just to get it to run the cron job once.
Yes. Well, the future problem solving, it's like I'm preparing for the future. I'm going to build us an architecture for the problems we haven't had yet, is such a mistake. And 90% of Kubernetes is, I think I will have a problem in the future, but I don't have it now. And it is just borrowing problems that you don't have, go fix the thing you have in front of you, get it working, and don't incur too much tech debt. The second you go like, oh, I'll solve that with Kubernetes. All right, you just put an 800-pound gorilla as your tech debt to start with, and you haven't even gotten value out of it yet.
I knew it was going down a really bad path when VMware announced Tanzu. Do you remember VMware Tanzu? Originally, at my job, when we were building Kubernetes as a service, as a managed service to offer internally, we looked at Tanzu because we thought, and it might even be the case, that it was a managed Kubernetes offering that you could leverage using Terraform resources to build a cluster via vSphere. And it turns out that they wanted to rebuild the whole VMware ecosystem in running on top of Kubernetes, defined by Kubernetes resources.
I didn't know they did that.
It's still going on.
Wait. So they take a completely functional, useful platform. VMware is very good at what vSphere did. Really good at certain things.
It's really good at certain things, and it is an excellent tool that has been battle tested for 20 years.
Yeah. And they decided they want to abstract everything behind Kubernetes API.
That they wanted to start deploying the vSphere control plane and hypervisors with Kubernetes. Yes. So like for example, the network fabric then becomes, right, like a CNI driver.
Yes.
And that CNI driver, theoretically, you could plug and play with another CNI driver and it should still work. Keyword is should still work.
And
Because, it's not like there are hardware drivers and, one protocol might be InfiniBand, not even use, Ethernet.
Why did I did not know that was. I thought it was what you initially said. It was like, oh, we're gonna give you what you want, which everybody's asking for, and you can use your standard kube control and deploy things, and it will happen. But we'll orchestrate that so that the VMs will happen via vSphere all behind. Great. It'll just give you a nice interface on top of it. But they wanted to manage the hardware abstraction for their. Wow, that's insanely bad. I had no idea.
I would argue that if you were starting at the beginning, that it might not be a bad approach. But why take something that worked and that worked very well and do that? I don't know. I'm not a engineering leader over at VMware. I can't speak to it. I would love to talk to someone about it that really knows it, because that would be.
You're welcome to join. We do guests here. Come on, join. Yeah. Come on down.
That would be a great, more than an hour conversation. But my understanding is that the idea behind it is that they could start to push newer, more common patterns and software to their deployment for vSphere using Kubernetes.
I can't think of a single thing that would need that. It's just a bunch of people that wanted to get on the Hacker News train and say that, hey, we're going to do that. Because I can't see a business value for that.
Yeah,
I know somebody sold it. Somebody bought that sales thing. I just don't think there's any business value. Maybe I'm wrong. It won't be the first time. But yeah, the bet on the larger Kubernetes, I'm just done with it. I'm just tired. I'm tired of talking about it. I'm tired of everybody trying to sell me some top thing on top of it. Another orchestration layer on top of it. Another solution that's going to integrate with it, and then the complexity is so high now with Kubernetes, to the point where every Kubernetes cluster is a completely unique special snowflake. Even within the same platforms teams, like you can't even move from one to the other with knowing where they are, and they're just huge operational burdens. They are not simple at all.
I agree 1,000%. And, coming from an operations background, I do understand why Kubernetes is a great platform to operate software on top of as a small team. But everything doesn't need to fit and run on top of it. So and you don't need 10 different, network overlays that exist now to do the same damn thing. Sure, certain ones might do some things certain better, but still, it's crazy.
Fork the project. It's fine to fork projects. It's open source. Fork and say, like, I need something special and unique. I'm going to keep on investing. I'm not going to go to the Kubernetes. It's fine. It doesn't have to have 1,000 integrations. They don't need to accept every person's random idea and say, okay, we'll give you an interface.
Do you think the last 5 to 8 years of this churn of companies that are building infrastructure products on top of Kubernetes, on top of containers, on top of other things, do you think it's because of the cheap VC money, and that we're going to start to see less of that in the next 8 years?
100%. I think it's, I'm going to say two things. I think it's technology out of control, technology departments and teams, because they're following shiny objects a lot. I'm not saying they don't have real problems they're trying to solve, but they're looking to what the industries provide. Oh, Kubernetes is the ultimate solution to all problems. So they're driving these initiatives and they're feeding them into every nook and cranny. Oh, this is how we beat DevSecOps. This is how we beat cloud agnostic. This is how we beat X, Y, and Z. But those aren't important until those are actual problems that you need to accomplish. And because it was available and people kept on putting money out there, why not? Sure, we can do that. I think it needs to be less choice in this space, and I think you're going to see a lot less of them. I think you're going to see less vendors in this space, less people going down and just go like, I need a product that works. I need it to be simple, and we need to ruthlessly focus on delivering that product. And if you need Kubernetes, great. Show why, and it better have a high value proposition.
Do you think that we lived in a bubble and now the bubble's popping, and or is that or is the money simply moving away from infrastructure and into AI?
I think about two things. I don't know for sure. I don't know for sure. I'm less convinced on this. I think that infrastructure got way too much money, and it grew too much because DevSecOps, DevOps, and whatever those words, cloud, blah, 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 whatever got amalgamated into that and allowed these idea that we need to fix infrastructure, make it modern in order to deploy our apps in a modern way. They didn't. They needed to make sure the apps were modern first and then migrate them in piecemeal, or relentlessly focus on getting them modern, not the infrastructure, and then bring the infrastructure to meet them as they needed to. I don't know where that money's going to go, but it needs to stop being spent because it's insane. I'm going to use the Python. I like the benevolent dictators. I think we need I think infrastructure like those, you need somebody that's going to stand on top, say, fuck no. We need less. We need to hold the complexity back. And yes, we need people that, if you're at an IT department and you have 1,000 experiments being run in like 6 different Kubernetes clusters run by 6 different teams, somebody needs to stand up and say, shut it down. It's not worth it. Go deploy your stuff by hand. I don't care. It's okay to use Ansible. It works. It's okay to use a solution that isn't the most modern to get your software. Great. Your pipeline's mature. You're deploying your software in consistent ways. You have a reproducible Spinnaker deployment structure. No problem. Great. Now you can move on to making a scale-out infrastructure. But you need all the other things first. And then you need a fucking dictator to say, why are we doing it still? It's expensive to run.
Oh, I know all about that.
I think I know a dictator about this kind of stuff.
I know all about that. This could be a very deep or very inch deep, very topic, depending on how we go about it. But I think that the next 5 to 10 years is going to be really defined about how software and AI in particular, or machine learning adjacent services, are going to enhance the productivity of the act of building software and of building solutions. I don't think they're going to be replacing armies of programmers.
I agree. We can go as deep as you want, but think of it this way. The smarter are going to use the best algorithms to make themselves better, and they're going to be even better. And you're going to hopefully get smaller teams eventually, not because you want to reduce the workforce, but because a smaller team communicates much more effectively. They are more impactful, and they can work together better. I think that's the value proposition that comes out of AI, is that in order to get a feature out, you can have your team of 4 be punching way above their weight, and they don't need to coordinate as much. 4 people versus 10 is drastically different. And I think that's where the power is going to come from. And I think that's where like AI giving developers is like, you're going to shrink the teams. You're going to not necessarily shrink the departments, you're going to shrink the teams. You're going to shrink the people rolling out feature XYZ in website, or AI backend, or analytics, because they're so much more productive per hour, and because they have AI tools that they can be tighter and sync together and focus on solving really awesome problems and really doing amazing things. That's how I think. I think that team's going to get better.
I agree. And I also think that it goes much wider in the white collar industry than just programming. I think now you're going to start to see those types of integrations in your Word documents across enterprises. So now you can start to share the ideas and the work product that other people in the company you're in have produced. And you can do it in a way where you're able to ask a large language model to cater specific templates or even reports in Excel to data and even particular readers and how they like to see it.
I think that's true, but I don't think it's going to. I don't see it big of an impact there as you do. I think that I'm detecting we're at a different level there. I think that office work, back end, like PowerPoints, all the jockeying that goes on, I think that they are going to be extremely hesitant to use this. I think the update's going to be much, much slower. And I don't think they're going to have the tools built in a way that's as impactful and that people are going to second guess them. The reason why I think the programmers aren't is because they're dealing with something that is code that they can review and they can talk and share about. When you're talking about, for lack of better terms, a Word document that's giving out feelings and presentation and trying to sell something, I think that people are going to still hold that pretty close. It could eventually be good, but I think it's going to take longer because it's going to be more sell side and it's a small group.
That surprises me, actually, about you. That answer. Given especially today when you used Midjourney to generate artwork for this podcast. We released the first episode today. And I think it produced some amazing artwork, and anyone listening should definitely go and check out the website, surprisemultiplayer.com. Look at that. Seamless plug during podcast.
Yes.
But that actually does surprise me because just in the last 3 years, something like Midjourney is now, you can use Discord and use natural language to generate artwork. Why couldn't you do that for a short pitch deck given input criteria?
You can, but there is no skit like this. Let's use the AI. There's no downside. And I was already going like, how do I can't get this to do what I want, and I don't care. If I was going to go take a pitch deck to my boss and then he's going to have to go take it to the board, I goddamn better make sure I care. And what worries me and what I think is going to slow it down in this is the perception that people won't read what's being generated. And that perception is going to cause people to be hesitant to trust it and not know whether it's coming. And there's going to be a culture of slowdown to trust this. And you're going to have some people that are going to be really impactful and do it, but they're never going to tell anybody they do it so that they don't no, I do this all by hand. They're lying. They're using whatever tools they can get. But I don't think it's going to go as fast as it is with programmers. Not even with years until it's the same impacts.
I don't agree. I think we're going to see a couple of killer apps. But where I think that we're going to see the killer apps are going to be with the results of using large language models, either visually represented inside of an application or making the function of the application drastically more efficient, rather than the natural language interface that we're all used to right now today.
I mean, nobody wants to talk to your chat engine. Is fucking true. I'm fucking already tired of that. That's a given. But I don't. Maybe I spent too much time in my bubble world.
Let me give you an example.
Just don't see it yet.
I think there is an opportunity, and we talked in the last podcast a little bit about filters, right? I think there's an interesting opportunity if a product is able to define if I'm able to define how I want to see certain data in certain ways, then naturally I'm going to trust it much more than you sending me a particular work product that now I'm not sure if you wrote it or if an AI wrote it, so I got to kind of doubly look at it in two different lenses. I would much rather be the person defining the rules that the LLM's now using to filter data to me and then quickly able to go verify it, than the other way.
Well, then let me ask what you're doing. It's like, are you like department head trying to get information about the overall perspective of like how the manufacturing plant's doing, and you're going to use a large language model to help you in generate this stuff? Or are you expecting your minions to use these tools to produce better output? I use the term, but I mean, I don't know how else to describe it.
So
I mean, you have a whole structure of people below, and where do you see this fitting in the structure? Because that's the part I'm guessing I'm not
so yes, let me give you an example where I see this succeeding the best. And I'm not going to use a work example. I'm actually going to use an example in the family. Um, I I would love to have a shared assistant, digital assistant with my wife. So I knew that if I was scheduling something for work or if I was scheduling something for the family, that I could say it and define it in a certain way to that assistant, and then my wife could receive it on her side in the way that she now wants to consume it. And just that paradigm of having a filter or a pipe and a filter, or two filters, and I guess in a pipe, uh, I think you can use that in work now, where if you're able to see a feed of information, knowing some context about what that feed is, I could then define how I want to use that information, summarize that information, see it in front of me, and actually consume it without the other individual necessarily having to even worry about it.
But I want to use the idea because what I see happening and why I see it, I disagree, is I don't see the technology does any of that. I think the problem is that large language models allow for humans to communicate with computers in a better, more impactful way. But it doesn't change the paradigm of how the fuck do I get an Outlook calendar invite inside my wife's calendar that she agrees to it because she's on Google and she doesn't check them.
So here's why maybe I'm not communicating it, interestingly enough. So for me, there are certain ways that I like, just like I'm sure you and everyone like to consume certain types of information. And I would much rather have a system where I could tell the large language model how I want it to respond to me given certain events
Mm-hmm.
than necessarily my wife having to worry about any of it. All she needs to worry about is that it's going to get into the assistant, and then the assistant's going to know what it needs to do to get to John's workflow.
Right. And so I guess that's the problem I'm seeing is the technology stacks aren't there for the workflow. I don't we
I
still haven't
agree.
figured,
I agree with that.
and that's
Right now, yes, you're right.
yeah,
I think the large language model, all it really does is put an interesting interface in order to generate whatever graph or flow chart needs to happen to eventually do what I was talking about.
and then we're back to how do we get a calendar entry about what kid needs to be at what location at what time across the 16 different services, 1,000 different proprietary everything, email, Slack, and who knows what else in any coherent way, because it's just not available. We're not doing that. We're not an open web. It's not an interconnected system.
You don't think that Apple has someone working on this right now?
No, not yet.
I disagree. I think that Apple, out of all of the major big companies in Silicon Valley, has been the most quiet about large language models. But I would argue machine learning over the last 10 years, they've been the most practical application that is now deployed in everyone's phone.
And they are actually the only ones that I think could actually make some of the things they're doing because they control everything from top to bottom. So like I can send you a note, an Apple Notes, and share with it. And then when I FaceTime you, it will literally pop up and say like, hey, you guys also shared this note. It will detect dates and says like, hey, do you want me to set up that? Or it will automatically, but it has that integration. That integration is the more interesting part for me, not the large language models. I would love that integration across the board.
100%.
But we are fucking going away from that stuff as fast as we can.
100%. But I see the large language model being an interesting way now to consume information. if we turn it around, right? And what I mean by turn it around, rather, if we use the prompts and we use it to be in front of us with information getting pushed to us rather than pulling that information at request, like you would almost with a search engine.
Okay, we're going into a different area because I think it's fundamentally different.
It is fundamentally different, and I think we could talk a lot about that. But let's why don't we? We're about at 45 minutes now, and we have one more segment left.
But I want to come back to this. I do want to come back to this. Most importantly, because large language models don't do dick. They are pointless unless you hook them up to something. If you want them to make them an agent, because that's what you're asking. You're not asking for a language model. You're asking for an agent. If you want to talk to it, right? And that agent methodology is just not there because we have a fundamental problem within the world in technology where we are building more silos. We are not connecting things. We are building if this then that was the best interconnected service that was there, and it's a piece of great. I used it, but my God, that's the best we can expect because there's too much money in not ever losing your customer. And you have these silos where you have Google versus Microsoft versus Slack versus X. And it's not open. It's not a communication platform. It is just about how do I make sure that I can keep my users there.
I feel like you're about to tell me about a new blockchain and cryptocurrency.
I'm not. I don't know how to solve this problem. I don't know. I just know that we lost email for some reason, and I still cry at night that nobody wants to use email because it was the greatest technology we've ever come across on computers.
I would say that we haven't lost email. I run email for a large company, and we definitely haven't lost email. Email has just stopped innovating 30 years ago or so.
That's why I love it.
It's why I love it, but it doesn't need to stop innovating, right? There are things that in email that exist today that have existed for a long time functionally in, email clients, even the open source ones that are free.
Yep.
If we had an actual web of trust in email that we could subscribe to and rely on, oh my God, how much that would make things so much easier.
That we're going to put a pin in because I want to talk about that for 45 minutes. Because this is something I have come to appreciate, that email is awesome. We are underutilizing it. I used it. Every company I use it at where everybody is, email is fucking awesome inside the company. It is such a dumpster fire for personal reasons because of whatever they are. And it pisses me off because it's so awesome. If you can be at your corporate environment where everybody uses email relatively effectively, it's like, oh my God, I want this.
Yeah. And I'm in an environment like that now. And granted, it's not as effective as it could be, but it is still the most effective communication mechanism we have.
Yep.
So Jeremy, what are you playing now on video games?
Still playing GT7 every now and then. I've been
Man after my own heart.
I've been eyeing Baldur's Gate 3. This could be an infinite time suck. But more importantly, usually in my video games is what is my son doing? And I have him hooked on Factorio.
I'm gonna put a pin in Factorio real quick and just talk a little for a second about Baldur's Gate. I don't remember the Baldur's Gate series. I remember playing it. I remember enjoying it. I don't remember anything else about it. And I feel, I don't know what all the hype's about, but I'll tell you what I do remember and what I did play the shit out of Diablo 4. And it was in my opinion, it was a great game. There were some mechanics that I didn't like that get patched in and out, all the time. What I don't like and what turned me off is the seasons and the fact that the character that I created 6 or 8 weeks prior to the new season, or maybe it was a little bit longer, can't be carried forward into the new content. I understand it. Like, I get why they did it conceptually, but it just burns really, really hard.
I get it, but it seems like they repeat the same mistake every time they release this game, and every time they have the same problems, and they eventually go back. They like, this is the perfect idea. No, it's not. Everybody hates it. I understand why you're doing it. Just give up. Understand people want continuity. They feel invested in their characters, even if they're not high level. I spent 2 days. That's enough to feel invested. Like, why are you taking it away from me? God damn it.
You know, I'll push back a little bit. I care less. I get invested in the character, sure. I don't want to grind just to get to end game content every single new season. That grind to 50, and at some point, just like every other game, there's going to be instant boost to 30,
Yes.
right? It'll take a year, but it'll be there.
Yep.
And I just why bother? Make me do it once, like they did with the campaign. That was actually a really awesome system. Force you to go through the campaign once. Force you to do side quests and some of the altars of Lilith, the searches. Great. Let me get to the end game content and then focus on the end game content.
I gave up before then, so I don't know.
It was almost perfect, Jeremy. Like it would have been perfect if they took the same concept of carrying the content between characters and they just continued it in the DLC and eventually the expansion. And I only had to do it once per account. And then, or you know what, I would even settle for once per hardcore veteran tier, right?
And you get good at that, and it makes you have the whole process, and you get to move your weapons around so it's faster and it's more efficient. You know what you're doing. That's reasonable. Yeah. I don't know. Blizzard's been letting me down for years, so.
It's almost like we're used to it.
Maybe.
And yet,
maybe that's that.
Spent a lot of money and still bought the goddamn game.
Every single time.
Every single time.
I didn't buy the mobile one, that's for sure.
I didn't buy the mobile one either, but I did fork out whatever the $80 is for the silver edition or whatever, digital edition.
I did too.
Yeah.
I did too.
And the honest truth is that I'll probably skip a season or two and then I'll come back and I'll do the whole thing, right? Which is perfectly fine for me, and that's actually how I played Diablo 2 and 3 for many years. I think it's great. But I'll definitely end up doing it when the expansion, the story expansion comes out, because I like the story.
So gaming for me is turned into a social thing. Gaming is to hang out with my friends. It is not to play the games by and large. Except for Gran Turismo still. But that's a different thing because that's got my idle time while listening to podcasts and a whole different multi-genre thing. But that's what I want. Well, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I don't know how long. Destiny, the Destiny 2 time frame.
I remember.
The game was good. It had the best. It still has the best shooting dynamics of a game.
Destiny 2.
Yeah.
In Destiny 1, I think it had, the dynamics were great, and I know that there's a certain someone that would probably slay me if I said this. I preferred Destiny 2. The gameplay, the different map modes. I thought it was better. I enjoyed it. I think Bungie did a really great job carrying that game through the many years of expansions and DLC. What I don't like about Destiny is kind of I came back to it about a year and a half, 2 years ago, just to see where the story has come to. I like that they did the skip forward shortened version of the story. They had I don't know what they called it, but I don't like the fact that they vault content.
Yes.
I understand it. I get it. It's still,
for people that aren't familiar with Destiny 2, vaulting just basically, the game got so big that it was pushing to the point where they had to remove levels in order to be able to keep the download under the maximum size of PlayStation and Xbox games. They had actually gotten to the point where there were some consoles you couldn't play the game on if they kept all the content. In which I get why they had to remove some of that. I'm pretty sure better compression would have done a little bit something on some of those textures. Come on.
Or you stream it in a way, right?
Yeah.
You can. There are ways to solve this, and
Yes.
sure, I'm sure at a certain point. I mean, we have. Well, I can't say we all. Many of us have read and watched Ready Player One. There's gonna have to be a way that
Yes.
because that's where we're going. We're going to VR. We're going to this.
Oh, I don't agree. We're going to VR.
We'll be there. Yeah. 30 or 40 years, we're gonna.
Okay.
Maybe VR is the wrong word. Augmented reality is much better, but we're gonna have computing devices that will need to be able to seamlessly transition between. I would
30,
say
40 years. Sure. I'll take
forward.
I won't argue against that. But in 5 years, hell no.
Oh, definitely not.
No.
I mean, I bought. So I'll talk about the games real quick that I'm playing, and I actually agree with what you said at the beginning. For me, gaming, with the exception of Gran Turismo, which is interesting, we both have that same exception, is a social event. Diablo 4 was a social event. Some of the Call of Duty games I played were social. I have a bunch of single player games on my system that are still probably the best games I've played in the last 5 years. God of War Ragnarok is one that I still haven't finished. But for some reason, I just, at the point of my life, when I want to go downstairs, I want to multitask. I want to be able to drive and listen to a podcast or listen to some music or who knows. And I can't be 100% focused on a story while doing that.
It's also the time commitments. Like a single player game, like Baldur Gate, by the way, we can come back to that. Like, there's 170 hours of cinematic fucking.
That's
time.
amazing.
It's
like
insane.
The Witcher 3.
It's 3 times bigger.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like there's no I'm drooling at this game, but I know in the reality I'll get through 2% of it. Nostalgia's strong with me, but that's fine. But the social is the thing. It's you know how hard it is to get 3 people out at the same time? Freaking impossible. So the nice thing about video games is, hey, drop online, anybody's around. Let's come together. It's harder and harder as people change, life change, but that's still a thing. That's why I love Destiny. It was the ultimate social game, played all the time, and then it just started petering out as the people couldn't handle the game anymore. I wish we could get more people playing games like that. But yeah.
The interesting, let me say that Gran Turismo is actually one of the reasons why I hope more people that, at least in my friend circle, get involved in gaming, because it does have that sense of being able to be offline, separate from your friends, and still have this kind of community and the ability to race each other, have time trials, like compete against each other in a way that that's amenable to people with different schedules.
Yes.
I do believe that it's definitely not perfect in that regard. And if Polyphony Digital or whomever creates the next game that is similar to Gran Turismo, if they can take that same concept and build it even further, it'll be even amazing.
They need to find a sweet spot. I think they did this in Gran Turismo 7 of competition for the individual that's arcade-like while still being sim-like. I don't think they have created that same kind of pickup game and have fun that you can with your group of friends while still constantly moving forward. Because there's no team base, there's no co-op, there's no way to form a real effective team and still keep it entertaining without getting unbelievably serious.
I agree with Gran Turismo on that point. And in fact, there are things in Gran Turismo that just, to me, absolutely don't make any fucking sense. Like, and I could talk about this for a while, but what are the pinwheel of cards, the mobile game that, I play every single time that I do 26 laps and, I can get an engine or stupid credits. I'm not going to buy DLC. Sorry. I'm never going to have all the cars because I don't grind credits. That's not how I play the game.
I do. It's called my son.
Yeah, well, that's the other thing is you've already co-opted, child labor to grind credits. It's no longer Chinese gold farming in World of Warcraft 3. It's I had a child and he's now doing it for me in Gran Turismo.
If I had a farm, he'd be working the farm, but I don't have a farm, so now he's gonna.
You just have GT credits. I get it, man. Totally. But all seriousness, I do think that like that game has like 3 different games inside of it, and they need to listen. I hope that they pick one and it is the sport time trial game with a little bit. They need a campaign mode because the campaign mode for me, the cafe books is just stupid. Like go around and race. Like give me a little bit of a campaign. Like come on, I want a little bit of a story. I paid you $80.
There was no story there. It was me just hitting X, go forward, pass.
And at that point, like, then just let me go into the next screen. Like, don't let me I don't want to see this guy on the screen, blah, 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 in subtitles the whole time.
They have a love affair with their cafe model.
They do. What I do have to say though, is EA Play, for anyone that doesn't know about it, lets you play several EA games on any of your platforms for 4 hours, new games for as a demo. And I played F123 a few weeks ago. I think that has a lot of promise. I'm not really into the F1 racing as much as I am the GT racing, but the way that they've developed a lot of the on-air racing, the online components, the team components, is going a lot more towards what you were talking about earlier, Jeremy. And the ability to have offline championship modes and circuits, and then have point-based between friends. Yeah, it's getting there. It's getting there. I think there are some other games that are coming out in this space, Ren Sports and a few others that might have that similar feel, but they're leaning more towards the esports side.
Okay, so I'm not ready for esport and not ready for that level of competition. I just want to pick some friends that are reasonably, and sometimes we can make it all at the same time. Sometimes your time trials aren't, but hey, and then you just
you want to know what I want? I want Gran Turismo's weekly races and weekly time trials, but I want the ability to create my own campaigns and share them with friends. That's what I want.
Yeah, and then you have a 6-week long process. And then you basically all that is to basically your starting rank we're all going to play on the same time live on a Sunday, and that's all your starting place is determined by how you did the race. Everybody can have fun. Nobody's going to get kicked out.
And Dave Portnoy can start a side business and have racing betting and make $500 million and buy it back for $1.
David Portnoy, God.
Listen, the man's brilliant. You can say as much as you want about him, but
he's an asshole.
That doesn't mean he isn't brilliant.
Then I understand these things are different. Good for him. Fuck him, but good for him. I'm proud of what he able to do.
Fuck him. Good for him.
Just it's Matt Levine. That's all I know of David Portnoy is from Matt Levine, and then every now and then he shows up on Reddit.
I always see Dave Portnoy on the One Bite, pizza. I subscribe to that channel. I've done some of the pizza crawls, and he does have some awesome videos. So, in that regard, and that's how I was actually introduced to him. I didn't even know about the Barstool sports connection until much later after watching those videos.
I saw a few of the One Bite, but I'm like, it takes more than one bite. But that's a
that part I still don't understand. He's like, every time he says, everyone knows the rules, one bite, the dude eats the whole slice of pizza almost every time. And it's like, listen, I'm not the smartest guy, but that definitely isn't one bite.
Definitely not. But yeah.
What? So earlier you said that you and your son are playing Factorio. What interests you about?
No, not me and my son.
Just your son?
Just my son. So I do not have that level of commitment and time.
So
have a new programming language hoisted upon me.
That's where I was going. What got him interested in Factorio?
So I have a thing with stupid video games. So he wants to play video games all the time. He's a 13-year-old boy. All his friends want to play Fortnite. They are fucking horrible. All they do is yell and scream at each other. Fortnite between a bunch of boys. And then what I do require if he wants to play certain video games is that he has to master something. So I'm like, look, if you want, you can buy new video games whenever you want if it's got a challenge behind it or you have to actually accomplish something. And particularly first person, like single player games that have components. So he's at in games +7 on Elden Ring now. So he's beaten it. He wants to try to beat Elden Ring without armor and with 1 hit point. So he's gotten really good at the game. He well deserved. I mean, people has put a lot of time, but he knows what he's doing. But so because of that, I'm like, all right, you need your next challenge. And I'm like, let's try this. So I showed him Factorio. Yeah, we're 50 to 60 hours deep on that for him of active time because it has a difference between active and inactive time. He spends a fair amount of time on building templates, macros, how to rebuild save, how to design and lay it out so that he can consume resources, how to get it to the point where he can build his structures up. And I'm like, you do understand you are learning programming. He looks at me like, what do you mean? I go, it's a turning complete programming language. You can build a CPU and then you can program the CPU. He's like, really? I go, yes.
Yeah. Send him some blog articles and let him go down the rabbit hole.
Oh God, if I could get my son to read instead of watch a stupid YouTube video, that would be the greatest thing in my life.
Is it the attention span or is it the medium
No.
that he finds easier?
That's what kids do. Like if I tell him to do something, he's gonna be like, I don't know how. We'll go figure it out. Okay, YouTube. And that is the default for everything.
I do that now too. Like if I have something in my house that an appliance, I had a new refrigerator, and I needed to replace a filter in it. And honestly, the first thing I did was, where did that stupid manual go? Fuck it. I'll just go on YouTube and type the model in, and it shows me how to do it.
YouTube is unbelievably good. But I have to start setting rules for myself because YouTube has turned into a TikTok-like hellhole. Of
Doom
YouTube
scrolling.
Yep. And I'm starting to set rules like if the video is shorter than 5 minutes, I won't watch it.
I need those rules in my life.
Because it's really hard because I hate to say it, I like some of the, we can talk about a crazy con. There's some lore concepts that I just doom scroll through knives and lore and weird things. And I'm like, why am I doing this?
I'm going to pause real quick. There's a super interesting YouTube channel that my daughter and I watch, and it's called, I think you actually told me about this. Is it Kurzgat?
Yes.
Kurzgat. Yep. And that for me is the perfect format and the perfect medium to doom scroll, because it is teaching me something and it's keeping me intellectually engaged, and it is so dangerous.
But at least
you're learning something.
You're not only learning, and they fact check and they do the real work. This channel makes real money. They put real time and effort behind it. They are no joke. I guarantee you 99% of the YouTube shorts have no thinking behind them.
Absolutely not. And, I would say anyone that is interested in actually learning something about science, history, take some time and watch some of these videos, because it really reminds me of being in science class and watching a TV show that actually explained to me how cellular division worked.
But it's interesting. They do it in a good way. They make sure that it's interesting. And my favorite part is they go like, we are simplifying this because we don't know how to not simplify this. It's very complicated. That's awesome. The fact that they paused and said that because they're like, it's not clear, it's not possible to say something this complicated. So just, we know it's simplified. It's not perfectly accurate.
They do such a well job that I was watching a playlist of these about quantum physics, and my 5-year-old daughter was sitting next to me, and she actually was asking pretty decent questions about being 5 years old, being able to ask questions about planets and the moon and things that are in the, and just by listening part-time, because she is still watching something else on YouTube on her phone, she's been able to multitask and actually ask questions and be engaged in the conversation. So I think it's an amazing medium, but I understand entirely what you mean about just going down a doom scroll YouTube and chill evening.
Oh, and I'm, so if you ask my kids, they are not happy with me. They are perpetually, we could have an entire segment on Jeremy's unreasonableness as a father in trying to limit technology. And then they go like, well, we can get around it. And I go, no, you can't. You're not going to beat me yet.
It's a challenge though. The day that, I think the day your kids beat you at your own game is when you hat tip them and say, thank you, kid. You've finally grown up.
Well, my son had his screen time password for a week.
He was smart enough not to.
He wasn't smart enough to not tell his sister.
See?
And she knew for 6 days.
Wow.
He didn't say anything. And then he fucked with her in a way. It was, and
of
she's
course.
Like, JD knows his screen time. I'm like,
I mean, listen, screen time passwords, they're only 4 numbers, right?
I've actually emailed Tim about this.
Oh, really?
I didn't get it. Oh, yeah. Come on. This is ridiculous. A screen time password being 4 fucking numbers. What the fuck?
So my daughter, we use screen time because it's, my daughter has it's an old iPhone, but we use it like an iPod. So she watches YouTube Kids and plays some games on it. She's now started to look at any type of pin pad that we have in our house. So like the Ring door lock or other things that have pin pads. And she's starting to figure out that the numbers are about the same as the ones that we're using for screen time. And I see her looking around and trying to, guess which numbers and typing it in. So she's not wrong. And hopefully she doesn't listen to this. They are the same codes.
Yeah. We used to have the same codes for brother and sister. Not anymore, because that's a pain in the butt to trade. God, the amount of pin codes I have to keep up with.
Do you think that at some point before your children have moved out of your house, when they're both probably a couple more years older, that you start to use the concept of power-ups during like chores? Like you would tell her brother's password so she could do things to fuck around with like the time and stuff on his devices?
No, I don't think that's going to go well.
Yeah, you're probably right, actually, now that I think about that. Yeah. It'd be great if there was an inherent way to fuck with people that didn't involve giving them all the data. But
yeah. No, that's like phones, like slightly different thing is, I've made it I asked my wife, I go like, you cannot give the kids your phone anymore. They cannot do that. And I go like, I need to be able to communicate with you, not worrying about what they're going to see, because we have to discuss things that are not appropriate for our kids to deal with. And so that's a hard habit to break, because it's really easy. Like, here you go, fine. Blah, blah, blah. I'm like, they have phones. They can,
and they have YouTube, and they literally could, in 5 seconds, probably figure out how to get all the information off.
Yeah. Well, I want to make something like my son if his friends are not allowed to listen to this podcast, because if they find out he doesn't have YouTube anymore. He hasn't had it for about a month and a half.
I'm surprised he hasn't killed you yet.
So with my son, YouTube I have trouble controlling it. It's impossible. He cannot accomplish basic things with YouTube. It's just a perfect fit for his brain, and it just sucks him in. And he needs to get a little older so that he has to figure out a way to build his own tools to stop it. Because it is not a good thing for him.
It's pretty bad for me too. I understand.
Yeah. My daughter, on the other hand, she's like, I want to watch this thing. And then she's like, I saw how to paint. I want to go paint. Goodbye.
Yeah,
Boom.
my daughter's like that too. I think my son's definitely a bit more like your son though. Just based on what I'm hearing. So you talk a little bit about the tools you've developed to kind of control these things, because I really only use FaceTime. I don't do any. I'm not at the point yet with my children that I needed to do domain blocking or anything other than the basic time-based
I use
limitations.
Okay. So I did all screen time. It is all apps are 100% approved. They can't buy anything. They couldn't buy anything, download anything without approvals. They had block times were 8:00 at night. They still can't have their phones in their rooms with them. They go to bed with a room without that shit in it. And then social media was completely blocked. And then all video games for my son he has an hour and a half of video games on his phone. That is it. And he has to ask for more time. He's got 45 minutes of Snapchat, because I do think he needs ability to communicate. That's how a large amount of schools communicate. So he does that, but he knows he only has 45 minutes. So he uses it for communication, not for scrolling, because scrolling 45 minutes means that, hey, I'm not going to be able to check my Snapchats later. And so, yeah, we try to force the social constructs around a very simple concept of geographically, he has a lot of freedom in where he lives. He can go where he wants. He has no curfew at the age of 13. He can go out with his friends, and he's been out till 1 a.m. already. And that's completely okay with us. But online, he has much more limits because there's no boundaries in geographical regions. My daughter's a different place, doesn't need. So that's how we do it, is hard limits, and then he has to ask for things. And then there's the harder problems, such as when to approve things, when to approve special requests, when to do those. Those can be quite annoying. But you just gotta be consistent.
Is the software good enough with Apple that it works seamlessly between iPad and Mac?
Yes. And it does really good statistics. The things that are really shitty are how to control context. So we no longer with my son or daughter. They're old enough to know the difference, but they couldn't manage their contacts. And so they couldn't add people for phone calls and for text messaging. We had to do it for them. So they'd say, hey, Mom, I would like to talk to this person. That system sucks so bad, it made me want to gouge my eyes out.
It's surprising in Apple's ecosystem that the contacts are... It's one of the applications that has been around since the beginning of the iPhone. And it literally hasn't changed at all since the beginning.
It is changing now.
It is changing?
In 17. Yeah, in the new version, 17.
Is it changing for the better, or which way is it going?
Remember how we were talking about way back in the AI area about how they're kind of making it all integrated and unified? So what that means is the picture, all that is automatic from iPhone to iPhone. If you call me, we no longer have to share pictures. I'm going to get a full poster size picture of whatever you send.
I don't mind that as much if there was the ability for me to say a picture for my close friends and a picture for publicly. If that functionality exists and it works, then I don't have a problem with even my V card, which is the worst name, by the way.
We have some friend that's going to have some really inappropriate messages that is going to...
I feel like I need to dub that one out. My iCalendar or card gets sent between contacts, because that's actually one of the more useful features that I think that has been buried inside of the send share functionality, Bluetooth to Bluetooth between Apple devices. It's an amazing piece of functionality. It fucks up so often where, especially with those of us that have the same name as our father and the same name as our children, it tries to merge all that shit together unsuccessfully.
Remember? Yes. So, but back to the kids, if we can go back, because I'd love to talk about this, because that's my favorite topic is why the fuck are contacts so hard to do in this world? Um, it's it just takes time, and I've tried to help other parents set up how we do screen time, and screen time is a dumpster fire. It is a mess. It's hard to use. It is literally the opposite of how it should be done. Screen time should be an Apple iOS app that makes it easy, that allows you to go through top to bottom. It should be like, hey, you can use these. It's built. The existing screen time is built into everything, but you can download an Apple app that gives you an easy to use interface as a parent where you can lock and unlock. You can set up very simple things to go forward and do things. It is so hard to use right. It's easy to misconfigure. Like if you put an application in two different groups, they both count against the same time clock. It's just
Right. That same
it's just
functionality realistically could be used and should be how they implement MDM, right? Inside of applications, but you know as well as I do that that's
they
not how this
no, and
thing's.
they're never going to have that incentive.
And
But wait, I'm going to just give you screen time is now API can be approved as data for applications. So you can now, so I use a little self timer like application called, let me pull up the name, Streaks. And then Streaks, it allows it, I can now have streaks based on, hey, if I didn't use 5 minutes of
that's pretty
YouTube,
cool.
it will give me at the end of the day, it will show like, hey, you used over your limit versus under your limit, so that
See,
the
that's
data
awesome.
becomes available to you, which I
That's
really
awesome.
like.
One thing, now just real quick, we're talking about lack of features in the iPhone. You mentioned earlier about your children looking at your messages and being able to communicate with your spouse without having to worry about your children seeing that. There are other applications like Telegram that do this. I am surprised you can't use Face ID to lock messages on the phone before you open it.
They're adding some interesting features with that. I know that your private tab in Safari is now behind Face ID. I think that there are some other things that are going behind Face ID, optionally. So you can ratchet that. It doesn't matter. My son now knows that he can add faces to Face ID, and you can have multiple faces. Like that's not it's can't be expected. Because I talk about the kids with my wife, and then she's like, "Fuck, they saw that." I'm like, "Thanks. Why would they have your phone?" I mean,
Right. Well, I mean, do you turn off like mute your wife's messages so that in the car they don't get read?
so made that mistake very recently where I'm like, "Oh." So I click it and I'm like, "Oh fuck, ding, 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 ding."
No. Rip the phone out. Rip the cord out of the phone.
Too late. Daughter was like, "Why mom say that?"
Oh. and that's a year of therapy.
I specialize in giving therapy. That's a full-time gig.
Oh boy.
But it's hard. That's the part I don't like, is like doing the right thing with a phone is impossible for 50% of the parents out there. And I'm being generous by saying 50 can do it. I think that 50 can't.
The honest truth is I didn't even know this functionality existed on the iPhone until I talked to you a few years ago when my daughter first started using an iPod. And I still don't know. I'm assuming there's a similar set of functionality on the Android. But it makes sense. It makes sense that this is something that is needed to be used by parents, especially parents now where kids are growing up with phones, before in some cases they even go to school.
Yeah. I mean, we have another thing. You ever heard of Greenlight?
Mm-mm.
So we have my kids. So we do a lot of skiing. We do a lot of traveling. My kids have credit cards. They've had them for about 3 years. It's called Greenlight, and it literally is an app attached to a MasterCard that we can put money into. They can get their allowance paid by, and I see every single charge they do instantly. It's wonderful. Like they get money for gifts or birthdays, it goes straight into the Greenlight card.
So let me ask you a question. Do you use Apple Pay? Apple credit card?
I use the Apple Card personally. My kids use the green light, but only my son can because he's 13. You can't use the Apple Wallet until you're 13.
That was my next question. I didn't know that. Because it seems like a perfect Apple Pay, Apple debit card situation where you could give them basically it's a secure debit card.
So recently the Apple Card you can give your kids Apple Cash at a younger age, but you have to be only the parents can send them money.
Which makes sense.
Pure Apple Cash and they're in control. But there's no credit behind it. It's just Apple holding lots of money.
There's a whole segment, a whole series of segments about the brilliance and maybe the downfall of society about Apple becoming a bank, and a loan provider and a payday provider or payday loan provider.
I thought I heard that Apple is one of the biggest people that has to deal with currency, the FX world, because they have so much money they have to move around.
I mean, I believe it. Like, if you think about it, I mean, you'd want to move all your money around based on what consumption, like your free cash. Like, listen, I'm not a finance expert, but I couldn't even imagine at the scale that Apple needs to operate how that works.
I mean, JP Morgan, Apple.
It works like a bank. It's got to work like a bank.
It's that thing.
Yeah. And I think, if I remember correctly, at least at the beginning of Apple Pay and the Apple Card, Goldman Sachs, or at least one of the subsidiaries, partnered with them. So I don't know how much they're actually doing.
So the credit card is 100% administered by Goldman Sachs. The float of cash for the Apple savings account, I do believe, is by Apple themselves, but I don't remember for sure. I have to check that out.
Wow. I know at least I got at least $15 in there. I'm sure a lot of other people do. That's a big float to carry. I mean, but they have what, like $100 billion in cash or something? Like,
they're richer than God.
Yeah, like they could. It's amazing to me.
Come on, they're offering at 4.15% APY in the most easy to use interface ever, and it's with Goldman Sachs.
Yeah, it's amazing.
I mean, you should use Betterment. You can get 5.5.
I love Betterment. But the fact that the Apple credit card is integrated for my wife and I, it works so nicely. We actually share the account. We can see the purchases. We can talk about stuff. Like, it works for us.
We should do a personal finance segment, because I think I won't talk about money, but
how we handle stuff.
Yeah, I love YNAB. YNAB.
I don't know what that is.
You need a budget.com.
Oh, I'll go there. I have been using Betterment. I love Betterment. It's been great for me for years. But I don't use it for anything other than like what I've rolled over from my 401ks from previous jobs.
Yeah, I've basically used. They have a system I understand. They've done reasonable with their fees given their structure, and that's basically what I optimize for, is fees. Try to keep fees low, and they have enough extra features that I'm willing to pay their fee structure, which is far more significant than Vanguard Direct. But I like having all those other nice little widgets and doohickeys.